What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction. Back with a movie soundtrack reaction. And this is a piece from The Last of the Mohicans called Promentory. Now, I thought of this because I did a reaction to a hip-hop tune earlier by Aesop Rock called No Regrets, and there's a violin line in the background of that tune. It sounds like it's probably sampled. And I don't think it comes from this recording, this track, Promentory, but the melody is remarkably similar. And indeed, I did a little checking around after doing that other reaction before shooting this, and what I discovered is there's two composers on the Last of the Mohicans soundtrack, a movie from 1992 starring Daniel Day-Lewis. It's about the French and Indian War, which is part of the 7 Years' War, which is roughly like a decade before the American Revolution kicked off, which, you know, having just been July 4th, it feels like it's a good time to talk about this. But yes, one of the composers, Trevor Jones, is the composer who put together this track, the essentially main title track, as I said, called Promentory. The other composer, I think, is Randy Edelman. I don't think he's involved with Promentory. But what I discovered is Promentory and Trevor Jones' composition here, it's adapted from Dougie MacLean's The Gael, which I assume means the Gael as in the Gaels, like the Celtic peoples, the Gaels, for which, you know, Gaelic in its various forms is named. But yes, I didn't realize it had been adapted from a pre-existing work, though it's not really a surprise. It does have this classic, like, Celtic music type of sound, does the violin line. But this piece, Promentory, also features this soundscape. You know, it feels like you're watching a movie, especially at the start of the track. So again, if you know the film Last of the Mohicans, you will surely be familiar with this piece because it's very prominent, it's very dramatic, very epic, and it is quite a good movie. Daniel Day-Lewis is very good in it, as well as a number of the supporting parts. So yeah, it's a good film, and one which, you know, as someone who studied like indigenous, like tribal American history, both like British colonies, in fact pre-British colonies, as much as can be known, and then on up through the first part of the 19th century, the film, now I saw it back in the 90s when I was a teen, and I'm talking about my studies when I was in grad school years later, but yes, as someone who did end up focusing in his historical studies on the time period and a little bit before and after of the film, it is now sort of particular interest to me, and it does feature, as I said, a little slice of the 7 Years' War, which was part of a larger campaign in the French and Indian War, which was part of the larger, like, 7 Years' War, at least as some people see it. In any case, let's give it a listen. This is by composer Trevor Jones, Promentory, which again is adapted from a piece by Dougie MacLean called The Gael, and it's included in the 1992 movie soundtrack for The Last of the Mohicans. It's interesting, like, it feels like the tune is sort of slowly winding down, but it fades. I feel like it should have done one or the other. Was it? That's why. Okay. That's why. Epic, epic. Indeed, that sort of interlude between the two parts of the track, I was confused because again, it felt like the track was slowly not dismantling, but the violin line was gently leaving it, but those like metallic percussion hits, they were still there, still more or less full volume. It was like, wow, like it's almost like it can't decide if it wants to fade out or have a proper like cold ending. And then right as I started to articulate that, the sweeping section, which is in the first part, but obviously that sort of cycling violin lead, or like fiddle maybe better, that's sort of the main part of the first half of the tune. And then again, there's like a minute or so in, you can hear that sweeping violin line come in, and there's like this kind of big scope, but it's still kind of like secondary to the main violin line. And then in this latter part of the track, that sweeping violin section, sort of takes center stage, and it feels more like movie score. I mean, even the first part, like I said, that opening with that, I don't think it's like a timpani, but it's kind of this pulsing, like echoing drum, and there's that low, like I think synth bass. That has a very like movie type of feel to it. But yeah, so it was interesting the way the track was constructed chronologically. But yes, the first part of the track, it definitely plays like I think 2 times in the movie. There's a scene where there's sort of like not a party or like a dance, but there is a bit of a like celebration inside I think one of the forts, and Daniel Day-Lewis's character, he's sort of like becoming involved with this woman, but she's officially involved with one of the colonial, like I think the British colonial officers. And so there's like an emotional context when it's playing, and then it plays again near the end of the film, which is a very like kind of action heavy part, and there's like a lot of combat, people dying, and that's the part that I always think of when I think of this tune. And shout out to Wes Studi. Wes Studi, character actor, he's in a lot of films as like a Native American, and he plays one of the antagonists, a very kind of ruthless member of a different tribe who I think is allied with the French, if I'm not mistaken. I forget exactly the the situations of some of the different characters, but he's one of the main antagonists of the film, and he's very ruthless, and he plays a prominent part in that last like action scene. But yeah, it's a really good movie, and for the record, Daniel Day-Lewis does not play the last of the Mohicans. He's not one of the Mohicans, though he does travel with them. Anyway, the point is, the track shows up in a couple places. It's very epic. I love that lead violin line. It does, or the fiddle line. It does have this kind of Celtic feel to it. And I guess shout out to Dougie MacLean for writing the Gael upon which this was adapted or derived, and shout out to Trevor Jones. But yeah, it's just a really cool tune, and it came to my head earlier because I reacted to that other track, which, again, I don't think samples it directly. Although now I wonder, like, if it samples the Gael, perhaps. But yeah, that violin line got in my head. I felt like I had to do this. So let me know what you think. I'll see you next time. Peace.